Good morning, Mets fans, and welcome to a Tuesday edition of Driving with Mr. Met. I am Mr. Met, and there was no Mets baseball last night, but I figured since I was away for over a week, I'd do a little bit of catching up on today's show. I want to do a brief recap of some of the things that I missed while I was on vacation. Talk about my thoughts about the team's string of success, and talk about this upcoming road trip, which might be the turning point for the season to continue going in the right direction or to slip back to the wrong direction. I want to talk about all of that today on our show. If there's one thing that I'm looking forward to in the next couple of weeks, outside of the Mets actually playing some solid baseball, it's the 7-line Army trip to Cincinnati in September. It's right around my birthday. It's something that I do every year with my brother. We go to an away game, at least one away game, and this year we picked Cincinnati. We were actually going to try to do Chicago this year as well, but as we all know, that got squelched thanks to the Cubs. So, but we are going to Cincinnati, and I am hopeful that in September the Mets are still relevant, and that series with the Reds is as important as any series the Mets play all season. That would just be amazing. I have yet to see a 7-line game that wasn't on opening day that was a juiced up environment where we actually had stakes other than the fact that we all have a good time and we cheer the team on, etc. I cannot imagine it being more intense than it is when we're all together and all cheering, but I can only picture in my brain what that would be like to actually be in a pennant race with the 7-line Army. I just think it's going to be a lot of fun. And that kind of leads me to next year's schedule, which of course was released earlier this week. The 7-line is going to do 4 games next year. 2 of them in the great state of Pennsylvania, actually. One will be at Citizens Bank Park against the Phillies, which is like 90 minutes, not even from me, from my house, I should say. And the other is going to be in Pittsburgh, which I've done PNC Park a few times, not with the 7-line though. So, but the one I'm most looking forward to is the Dodgers series next year at Chavez Ravine. I've always wanted to see Dodger Stadium, and I've been out there for work a few times, and as luck usually has it, when I travel for work, the home teams are never in town. I don't know why that's the case, but it's been few and far between when I've actually been able to see games when I'm on the road for work. So anyway, next year I'm looking forward to that with the 7-line. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about this year. As I was on vacation for the last week, there were a lot of things that I didn't get to talk about. And I want to go into a couple of them here. I talked yesterday about J.D. Davis and his emergence as a real offensive threat for the Mets. I did not talk much about Michael Conforto. And Michael Conforto needs to be addressed here, because if Mets Twitter had its way, Michael Conforto would be the 4th outfielder. Mets Twitter, as it usually tends to be, is completely schizophrenic, completely insane, and completely negative. No, I shouldn't say completely across the board, because there are a lot of really smart, really level-headed fans who use Twitter and partake in the collective known as Mets Twitter. I'm one of them. But there's just so many negative voices out there, and the people that think Conforto is not a good player, I don't know what they're watching. He is, when he is right, he is an elite offensive player. If you look at the numbers, he's in like the top 12 or top 13. If you look at OPS Plus and other advanced statistics, Conforto's numbers are right up there. And look, right now, you give me the choice between Michael Conforto and Bryce Harper, I'm taking Michael Conforto, and guess what? I'm guessing that a lot of other executives in baseball would have to say the same thing, because Bryce Harper's had one good season. Conforto's had a few. He made the All-Star team. He played an integral role in the Mets' run to the pennant in 2015, and he's having quietly this year a really, really solid season. So I want to tip my cap to Conforto for the work that he's done over the last week and a half or so. I also want to mention Wilson Ramos, who after really like a 2-month stretch, it seemed like a 2-month stretch, where the only thing he ever did when he was at bat was pound the ball into the ground in between shortstop and third base and be thrown out by 17 steps. All of a sudden, he's found his groove. He's driving the ball. He's hitting the ball with power and authority. And again, quietly, Wilson Ramos has the most RBI of any catcher in all of baseball right now. So this all leads me to the whole anti-Brody contingent of Mets Twitter, which is sort of an odd stepsister or cousin to the anti-Wilpon contingent. And I want to address both of those right now, because they've been on my mind, and I try to keep the discussion about the players and about the on-field stuff, but not being able to do these videos every day while still following the team last week, I spent a lot of time on Twitter, reading stuff on Twitter, and following people just saying some dumb things, and I need to address them. I need to kind of get it off my chest. So first, the anti-Brody crowd. The people that have attacked Brody Van Wagenen, and this actually you can even lump in Mickey Callaway too, because I actually made the question, posted the question on Twitter last week. Now that the Mets are playing well and he's pushing the right buttons, is anybody going to give Mickey Callaway credit? And I'm looking at the same sort of thought process around Brody. So Ramos turning out to be not as terrible an acquisition as possible. Is he the best defensive catcher in the world? No, by far. Is his mobility limited? Yes. Is he one of the worst defensive catchers in the league? Probably. But it's what I've said all season. Like, you can't judge a book before you finish it. You can't grade a movie before you finish the whole thing. If you're a teacher and you're grading a term paper that someone's written and have written a 25-page thesis, you can't grade it after reading 17 pages. You got to read the whole thing. That's what I've been saying about this season. Before everybody on Twitter goes batshit crazy about this team being terrible and Brody being a snake oil salesman and the worst general manager in the history of baseball, let's actually see what happens when the first chapter's finished of his tenure. Right? So we know right now that Brody Van Wagenen has a 3-chapter tenure as general manager. The Wilpons are not going to get rid of him in the middle of the first year. It's not going to happen. So let's see what happens at the end of the first chapter. Or better yet, let's look at it this way. It's a trilogy of movies. Each one independent, each one has its own story arc, start, beginning, middle, end, right? And we're in the middle of the first movie of a 3-movie trilogy. And it had a great start, right? From the come get us attitude that he brought to the team, Brody that is, to the good start the Mets got off to at the beginning of the season, which they seem to do every year. Had a really tough middle portion, which, I could have done without. I'm sure all of us could have as well. All of you guys could have as well. But it's now starting to get good again. And maybe, just maybe, the shitty part of the season was to see how tough we were, both as fans and as the team, to be able to bounce back from some just horrendous losses, gut-punching horrendous losses. And looking at the Mets bullpen and looking at the two-headed monster that was supposed to be the lockdown 8th, 9th inning for this team, if you look back at Tug McGraw's numbers, and I didn't know this until I heard Howie Rose talking about it on the radio like 2 weeks ago. If you look back at Tug's numbers in '73, Tug was terrible for the first 4 months of the season. He had an awful year, but no one remembers any of that because of how lights out he was down the stretch for the Mets. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but history shows us that stuff can change in the last 2 months of the season that can turn everything around. And maybe, just maybe for the Mets, that's Jerry's Familia finding his sinker again, which honestly it looks like he has, and Edwin Diaz regaining the confidence that made him baseball's best closer last year. Again, I'm not saying it is going to happen, but I'm saying it's a possibility. And let's be happy about that. Let's think about the positives. And that's my biggest gripe about Mets Twitter and the people that are on there constantly bashing every player and everything. And I mean, we could be talking about 10 things, and 9 of them are overwhelmingly positive, all related to the Mets. 9 of those 10 things just unbelievably positive. Teams playing well, they're picking each other up, the offense is clicking, pitchers are going 7 innings. A reliever can come in the 8th inning and throw one bad pitch, and that's the only thing that some of these dipshits on Mets Twitter will focus on. The one negative thing, like the 0.08%, that's just negative, because it's a joy for some of these people to just be miserable, and I'm tired of it, and I've grown to the point where I'm starting to unfollow and block these people because I just don't need their negativity. And honestly, it's the reason I got off of Facebook, because Facebook drove me crazy with how just ridiculously negative everybody was on Facebook, and name calling and pissing and moaning, and in that case, it was like people that I knew, like really knew personally, like my classmates from high school and from college, and just seeing their true colors. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to see the ugliness, and I didn't want to have to unfriend people. So I just quit. I quit. I'm done. I don't want to be a part of this toxic environment. And I'm starting to feel the same way about Twitter to a lesser degree, because in the Twitter sense, I don't often go on someone's Twitter profile and start scrolling through their tweets. I do more like the whole timeline thing where I look at what's going on now and I just scroll through like current tweets. So I don't get to sort of delve into one person's thought process. But I have to say, I've interacted with some people over the last week and a half or so that have made me go look at their sort of general being, and it's how I know these people are just so unbelievably negative. So it's the same people that hate on the Wilpons. And look, I'm not a Wilpon fan, right? But they own the team. They're the owners of the team that I love. And it doesn't mean I have to love them, but I'm not going to hate them. And I'm sorry, but guys, you have to be able to separate two things here. The Wilpons don't hate the Mets. They don't want the Mets to lose. They're just not good owners. And that's it. I mean, that if you boil it down, they're just not good at what they do. And if they would stay out of the way and let the people they've brought in make the baseball decisions, and if they would stop interfering in the baseball decisions, they would just run the company on the business side of the game and not worry so much about baseball operations, their fortunes might be better, and they might be viewed differently by us Mets fans. But let's be real about one thing here. If we're all convinced that they're crooks and they just want to make money, why would they intentionally suck? I mean, that's always the question that comes to my mind when I hear people bashing the Wilpons. Like, all right, I get it. Like, you don't have to be happy about the fact that there are owners. But you got to realize they don't want to lose. They serve to make infinitely more money when the team plays well. Look at this past weekend. I mean, the Mets packed Citi Field for 3 straight games. Packed. Playoff atmosphere. For a team that was at the time 3-4 and then 5-3, whatever. A couple of games over 500. They weren't in first place. They just played well for like 2 weeks. And it turned everything around for the fan base. So let's be real here. Let's stop bashing the Wilpons. And let's start realizing that they don't want to lose. They just suck. That's it. They're just not very good. And they'd be much better if they would just be silent owners, collecting their paychecks, because they'd make a lot more money that way. But that's not in the cards, because that's not the Wilpons. That's not who we have as our owners. So, that was a weird rant for me. I don't generally do that about Mets Twitter. But I do want to say, I am looking forward to this week's series with the Braves. The Mets have Wheeler, Matz, and Stroman going in Atlanta. I'm kind of bummed that neither DeGrom nor Syndergaard are going to be going to be pitching in this series, but at the end of the day, I think any one of the 5 starters is capable of shutting down an opponent. We just have to hope that we get good Wheeler, who historically has pitched well in Atlanta, and that we get good Matz. And I think good Matz is the most important of the 3. I don't know what to think about Marcus Stroman yet. We saw how amped up he was on Friday at Citi Field, but I don't know what to make of him yet in a Mets uniform. So I'm reserving judgment on him as his tenure with the Mets progresses. But it's a huge series. Don't make no mistake about it. I can't wait to watch. It starts tonight at 7:20, and after that, the Mets head to Kansas City, which could be a letdown of a series. The Mets could be so amped up and up to play the Braves that they could be sort of overlooking the Kansas City Royals, who are a bad team, but are still capable of winning. And if the Mets don't take them seriously, this road trip could be disastrous. I'm looking for a 5-1 road trip for the Mets. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not predicting it, but that's what I want. I want to take 2 out of 3 in Atlanta, and I want to sweep the Royals. We'll see if the Mets can do that. I think 4-2 is more realistic. I just hope it's not a 1-2 against the Braves and a sweep in Kansas City. Because while the sweep would be nice, and while the 4-2 record on the road trip would be nice, it'd be more of a statement, of course, if the Mets can take 2 games out of 3 from the Braves. But that's it for today. I will be back tomorrow to recap Game 1 of the Braves series. Until then, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter at Mr_Met. Don't be a troll on Twitter. And as always, let's go Mets.